So this morning, the message, the talk that I'm giving, I'm so happy to be speaking on, is the Illuminating teachings of Buddhism. This is the second talk in a 6-week series on world religions, which it just delights me to speak on because I think there are many paths to truth, and I think each one can sometimes give us another piece of the puzzle, right? I particularly love Buddhism. I love Hinduism too, which I spoke on last week. And just like Hinduism, Buddhism is so vast. I had to edit, and still I have a long talk for you today because it's really worthy of a lifetime of study. Buddhism is. It really is. So today I'm just going to offer a brief overview of some of the core and profoundly helpful Buddhist teachings. So, just to begin with a brief bit of Buddhist history, Buddhism began with the enlightenment of a man, um, Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama was born somewhere around 500 BC, and he was a prince. He was born to a king, and his father had heard he was going to be a great leader, but spiritual leader. And his father said, "No, I think you have that wrong. He's going to be a political leader. He's going to be the next king." And so his father kept him cloistered in the palace compounds his whole life, just really directing him to be a king. But at 29 years old, so the story goes, he left. He snuck out of the compound, and he went out and he saw suffering for the first time because he had been so sheltered. And he saw 4 things. And the first thing he saw is he saw illness. He had not seen illness. He had not seen the ravages of illness. He had been sheltered from seeing that. So that shocked him. And then the second thing he saw was old age. He saw old people. And in the compound, it was just all youth and beauty, right? All youth and beauty. So he was really shocked to see, wow, we get old. We get really old. And, we have this old age thing. But the third thing he saw really shook him. And he saw death. That was seeing a dead body. And his attendant, Chana, with him, he said, "What is that? What happened?" And he said, "That's death. Death happens to every human being." And so that really shocked him and shook him. And so then the fourth thing he saw an ascetic, a wandering monk that was in search of the truth and what would set us free from suffering. So he decided when he went back, that is going to be my path. I have to find the way out of suffering for myself and also for everybody, for humanity. So he did that. He went and he had many meditation teachers, and he studied meditation. And after about 6 years of practice, it's said that he sat under the Bodhi tree, and he vowed not to stand up until he was fully enlightened. And it said that as the morning star arose, he had a profound awakening, and he became a Buddha, which means awake. He became awake. And filled with understanding and love, And so the Buddhist teaching is that we all have Buddha nature. We all have Buddha nature. And that it's another name for what we call awake awareness, or we call Christ consciousness. In Hinduism, merging in Brahman, right? The supreme reality. So the Buddhist teacher I've spent the most time with, I feel so blessed to have spent a number of retreats with, is the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. How many people has anybody met him? Yes. Well, if you've watched his videos, in a way, you've met him. He is a Zen Buddhist teacher, and I love Tibetan Buddhism as well. And I would just say very, very briefly, the difference between Zen Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism is that the Tibetan culture is quite a bit more elaborate. They have more, focus on mantras and ritual. The Zen path is all about meditation and mindfulness. So, and of course, the Dalai Lama is the teacher of the Tibetan Buddhist the Tibetan Buddhists. And of course, I highly recommend studying his teachings. I have yet to meet him. I'd love to meet him. I do want to say about Tibetan Buddhism, I think one of the most powerful teachings on life after death is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And Sogyal Rinpoche wrote a version of it called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying that makes it a lot more palatable to us, our culture today. And that helped me so much when my mom passed. I had read it when my dad passed, but when mom passed 7 months ago, I just dove into it. And those teachings, the Bardo teachings, I really found a way to make them applicable to what I was going through with my mom and what I was feeling in my communion with her. So I highly recommend studying the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. But so today I want to speak more on the Zen path, and particularly the way Thich Nhat Hanh describes it, because I just feel like, his teachings are they're so full of love, and they're so easy to understand and apply. You may know that Thai, that's a short name for Thich Nhat Hanh, that means teacher. Thai left his body almost exactly 2 years ago, January 22nd, 2 years ago. But he describes how he has a continuation body, and that is any of us that practice mindfulness and practice his teachings, put them into practice. So I had all of his books before the Paradise Fire, and then, of course, they all burned in the fire, but I've been slowly accumulating them again. But I have found his way of teaching so helpful. Martin Luther King Jr. nominated Thich Nhat Hanh. They were good friends for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I believe that Thich Nhat Hanh should have won it 10 times over because he is such an embodiment of peace. He is just an embodiment. Let me read you what he wrote about peace. He says, "By the way we live our daily life, we contribute to peace or war. It is mindfulness that can tell me I'm going in the direction of war. And it is the energy of mindfulness that can help me make a turn and go in the direction of peace." Isn't that nice? So one of the things that Thai used to always say is that Buddha was not a god, that he was a human being just like you and me, and that he suffered as we do. It's just that he focused his whole life on awakening, and he woke up. And he spent the rest of his life sharing teachings. He had a good long life sharing teachings on how we transform suffering. Thai would often say that life is filled with suffering, but it's also filled with wonder, and he really placed his attention on the wonder. And I relate to that because I seem to have that habit myself. But he said, there's the blue sky, or today there's the gray sky. That's wonderful too. There's the wild rain. That's wonderful too. And there's the smell of hyacinths. There's violets blooming in Lithia Park. There's forsythia blooming in my backyard. There's wonder. There's wonder. Just to hear you laugh is wonderful. So his teachings are all on staying in touch with the wonder in life. One simple practice that I learned from him years ago was walking meditation, and to, with each step, plant a lotus. I actually wanted us to do this, but I think it's a little too much to ask you all to walk around the room. If you come to my retreat in April, we'll do a lot of walking meditation. But you just imagine as you lift your foot that a lotus is blossoming behind you, right? And it's just a beautiful way to plant peace into the earth, right? And it's also a way to stay mindful, because so often when we're walking, our mind is not together with our body. That's part of what mindfulness does. It brings your body and mind together. Thai wrote, "We walk all the time, but usually it's more like running, right? Our hurried steps print anxiety and sorrow on the earth. If we can take one step in peace, we can take 2, 3, 4, and then 5 steps for the peace and happiness of humankind and the earth." Yeah. So Buddhism is a science of mind. It's really the original science of mind, because they have so studied the nature of mind. And the word mindfulness comes from Buddhism. It's funny because I think that word mindfulness sounds like your mind's full, but it's really not that. It's that you're aware of what's happening. That's the way it's used. And it just means you're aware of what's happening in this present moment in your mind, in your body, in your feelings, and in your environment. That's mindfulness. So, living in a mindful way can change everything we do. It can change the way we walk, change the way we talk, change the way we eat. You can eat mindfully. It just, it's a way we can touch life deeply in every moment, every moment. So we might notice in a moment of mindfulness, wow, my mind is full of anxious thoughts, and I've been thinking them for a good solid hour. And my whole body's tense, my shoulders are up to my ears, right? And I'm not breathing. And so then the next moment, we take a breath inviting peace, right? We return to ourselves. We invite peace. We exhale and we begin to let go of all that contraction, right? So Thai has so many beautiful gathas. They're simple mindfulness phrases. One is breathing in, I'm aware of my body. Breathing out, I release all tension in my body. Let's try that. Breathing in, I'm aware of my body. Breathing out, I release all tension in my body. Nice. Another sitting meditation gatha. Breathing in, I have arrived. Breathing out, I feel at home. Arrived home. Arrived home. There is no future moment to get to. This is it right now. This is it. This is all there is right now. One of my favorite gathas is for talking on the phone or just talking, period. I had it for many years taped over my landline back when I had a landline. And it reads, words can travel thousands of miles. May my words create mutual understanding and love. May they be as beautiful as gems, as lovely as flowers. Yeah. And then the way you speak is so beautiful. Mindful speech can really save relationships. It can save relationships between countries, relationships in families. Thai was always talking about loving speech and deep listening. It's another practice we'll do in retreat. So we use mindfulness to see how we're thinking and feeling, and we use the breath and the skill in letting go to return ourselves to peace. I think that more easily we can let go, the more happiness we have. Would you agree with that? There's a really great story. You may have heard it, but there were these two monks, and they were on a long journey. They were walking cross country, a young monk and an elder monk, a novice monk and a seasoned monk. And they got to this raging river. And there was this beautiful young woman standing there, and she was looking at the creek, and she was thinking, I don't think I can cross out. I might drown trying to cross that river. And so the two monks, the young monk just walked right past her without a second thought, and he got in the river and he got to the other side. But the elder monk, saw her, and he thought for a moment, and he picked her up and he carried her to the other side. He set her down, and she was incredibly grateful. And then they went on their way. And after a while, the elder monk noticed that the young monk was fuming. He was just really, really upset. His mind was very disturbed. And he said, what's wrong? And the young monk said, how could you do that? How could you touch that woman? How could you carry her across the river? We monks are not allowed to touch women. And the elder monk just had a moment of breathing in and breathing out. And he said, I left that woman at the river's edge a long way back. Why are you still carrying her? Yeah. Why are you still carrying her? So tell me, what's the moral of that story? Just tell me one moral of that story. I want to hear from you. Be here now. Be here now. That's right. That's the past. Why are you ruminating? You're ruining your peace, right? What else? Anything else? Let go. Yes. Yes, compassion of action. In other words, use discernment and follow your heart, because sometimes that is more important than Buddhist rules, right? Monks' rules. Yeah. We are one. Yeah. Yeah. Rules are made to be broken. Yes. Yes. Well, his attachment and inflexibility, right? So, flexibility, right? Um, being adaptable, right? Yeah, I mean, the elder monk broke the rules for good reason. It was an act of loving kindness and compassion. It was an act of discernment, because saving a life was more important than following the monk's rules, right? And that could very well be what he was doing. And to live in the present moment, as you said. So in life, we learn and we grow. And sometimes we are this young monk. We have to use our breath and our walking meditation to let go of negative states, right? It's an ongoing practice, and returning to peace. The very first Dharma talk that the Buddha gave was the Four Noble Truths, the Four Noble Truths. And Thai said they're also called the Four Holy Truths, which I thought was interesting. And he said that our suffering is holy if we embrace it and look deeply into it. And that's an important point. He said if we don't, it's not holy at all. We just drown in the ocean of our suffering. I think that's such a deep teaching. When my mom first passed, I think the grief and the loss and the sadness, it was so immense. I felt like it was an ocean I could drown in. But I knew enough, because of the teachings I've had, the Dharma teachings I've had most of my life, to just be with it and trust it and just, see what's here, and what feels like an ocean of suffering. And that I just stayed with it, and I just felt like that it offered me these incredible um, um, heart openings, and alchemized my soul into greater compassion, greater understanding for grief and for loss, and also greater understanding of the true nature of the self that is deathless. So staying with the suffering is really key. Um, if we don't, though, on the other hand, if we don't explore the suffering, Thai says it's not holy. Like if we're full of anger, say, or resentment, and we just carry it around and we never examine it, and we don't have a willingness and a desire to understand it and become free of it, then it's just painful, right? It's painful as long as it needs to be, till we get around to examining it. I looked up the word holy. It means sacred and spiritually excellent. I like that. When we work with our suffering, and when we start to use it like compost to grow, Ty would always use that analogy. That's the nice word for it, compost. Compost in life, use it to grow, right? When we do that, it becomes spiritually excellent. I just love that. So the Four Noble Truths are, number one, there is suffering. We all suffer to some extent in our body, in our emotions, in our mind. We have to just acknowledge the presence of this suffering, right? And we often need help to do that. Sometimes we need a spiritual teacher or a therapist or a community of friends to practice with. The second noble truth is there's an origin, and there are roots and causes to suffering, right? So our spiritual work is to look deeply, and that's what self-reflection is all about. That's what meditation is all about, looking deeply. The third noble truth is there is a cessation of creating suffering, and that happens by refraining from doing the things that cause us to suffer. In other words, healing is possible. So the fourth noble truth is there's a path that leads to the cessation of suffering. There's a path of how we refrain from doing the things that cause us to suffer. And that's great news. There's a path to happiness, in other words. um, and so then the Buddha goes on to describe this path. You know what I love about Buddhism is they number everything. It's like the most well-ordered mind, right? You've got the path to the cessation of suffering is the 8 Noble Truths. But they've also got the 5 mindfulness trainings. They've got the 4 immeasurables. I love it. It's incredibly organized. That's why I love to share these teachings, you know. But the the Noble Eightfold Path is such a great teaching. I've done a series on it, and I will later this year do a series on it. But it's just very quickly, it's right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration, also sometimes called right meditation. But today, I just want to talk about right view just a little bit, because that's essential to understanding the whole rest of it. And I see right view as this way that we see clearly. It's a clear mind. We see things as they really are, not as they are through our filters or our triggers or our conditioning. And that's a view we want to get to, right view. Clarity is needed to see our suffering and to see what's caused it, to get to the root of it, right? To see and to be transformed and to walk the path of transformation. One of the things we need for transformation is we need faith. And I wish sometimes I could give some of the folks I care about, I wish I had a wand and I could just give them that mustard seed of faith. So we just have to have a little bit of faith. That's all, just a little bit of faith. I saw Thich Nhat Hanh at an amazing moment in time. I bet you all remember where you were on 9/11. It's hard to forget where you were on 9/11. I was at my home in Mount Shasta where I don't have a TV. It was my mom that called me. That's how I found out about it. But the very next day, we were all in shock. Of course, everybody everywhere was, especially in this country. The very next day, we had an impromptu healing circle in Mount Shasta that I led. And then the very next day, Thich Nhat Hanh was giving a talk in Berkeley, at UC Berkeley. And he was already in the country, fortunately. So I drove down there, and there was about 4,000 of us, and we were all sitting there together, and everybody was not breathing. You could feel just this immense collective fear and shock. And yeah, I mean, it was just overwhelming. The feeling of it was just such contracted energy. And Thich Nhat Hanh walks out on the stage, and just his walking to the center of the stage began to bring me so much peace. And I know everybody felt it, because he was a living Buddha, and he was just this embodiment of peace. And then his monks and nuns walked behind him, and they just had that same energy. You could tell they practiced together so often, years as a sangha, and they just carried this peace on the stage, and we all started breathing. And then he gave this amazing Dharma talk. It was the most beautiful Dharma talk I have ever heard. And we were just all transformed. We all began breathing, and you could feel this collective sigh of release in the whole, and relief in the whole audience. And what's really neat is years later, I found an article about that very night that he gave that talk. Somebody was interviewing him, and he said, he was talking about that night, and here's what he said about it. He said, "I reminded everyone that responding to hatred with hatred will only cause hatred to multiply 1,000-fold, and that only with compassion can we transform hatred in anger. I invited them to go home to themselves and practice mindful breathing and mindful walking to calm down their strong emotions and to allow lucidity to prevail." Yeah, the lucidity, that's the right view. That's the clear seeing. So great teachers, they always turn us back towards love, don't they? They always help us remember our true nature again and again. We seem to be a forgetful lot, wouldn't you say? It seems like we have to be reminded every day. You are that. You have Buddha nature. And so the very last teaching, I'm going to keep it brief, but it is a beautiful teaching on taking refuge in the 3 gems, or the 3 jewels. And, the three jewels are the Buddha. The Buddha is the enlightened teacher. The Dharma, which is the path and the body of wisdom and the wisdom teachings. And the Sangha, which is the community of spiritual brothers and sisters that practice the art. It's an art of transforming suffering. We practice that art. So the way that Thai shares this recitation of the three jewels or three gems is I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. And so, what is taking refuge? It's finding the place that's safe, right? The place that's safe. It's the place we can rely on. In that safe space, we transform. We open like a flower. So I really feel that we are co-creating together here. This is the Sangha, and we're creating very intentionally this space in spiritual community with the holy purpose of living consciously, of living loving kindness, of walking a noble path, Thai wrote, holiness is also within you and within your Sangha. When a community sits, breathes, walks, and eats together in mindfulness, holiness is there. Yeah. So in closing, Buddhism, it's a living tradition, and we are the continuation body. When we practice mindfulness, we are the continuation body of our greatest spiritual teachers. When we breathe mindfully, speak mindfully, walk mindfully, and plant peace into the earth. So may the Buddha nature in every one of us awaken fully and shine in our smile, in our compassion, in our actions, in our breathing, in our walking, in all that we do. As Thai would often say, our own life has to be our message. Our own life has to be our message. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you.